Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Moyo, and today I'll be showing you how to cut and sew your long straight wide leg pants. So if you're interested, make sure to watch the video to the end. And also there are some things that you need to keep in mind before you make your own pants. The first thing is the length. You cannot be using your normal length. Say your trouser length is 42. I always like to add minimum of 3 inches. The minimum that you should be adding if you're making yours, say you don't want your pants to be too long, is 2 inches. You need that extra allowance because you don't want your pants to be looking, I don't know, just to be jumping and looking like it is handmade. You see, it's all these small things that will make your project look like, no, you bought them with plenty money. You understand? That's it. You are doing DIY because you want to save money, and you need to make it look like it's original. You understand? Another thing you want to do is to always add at least 1 inch for ease when you are doing your hip. Sometimes I add it when I'm cutting, sometimes I add it when I'm sewing, but in this tutorial I'm going to be adding it when I'm sewing. So you're going to see all of that in this video. If this video ends up being helpful, don't forget to give me a thumbs up, like this video, comment, share with your friends, and I will see you guys in my next one. Bye guys. First, I drew a straight line 1 inch away from the top of my paper, and I labeled out my waist. For my crotch area, I used 12 inches for my crotch, and that is my standard. Then I drew a straight line as well. But if you're a size 14 up, I'm actually size 8, turning towards 10. But if you're a size 14 up and you're tall, then you have to use 13 inches for your crotch. That's a minimum. Then for the length of my trouser, I used 47. That 47 is not my actual length. It is my actual length, which is 42 plus 3 inches that I want it to be free, because I want my trouser to be long enough. And then also I'm going to add extra 2 inches to fold in my trouser, to hem my trouser, and total is 47. Now let's take our body measurement. I'm going to come over to my crotch, and then I will divide my hip measurement, which is 40 by 4. So I'm going to take 10. I'm going to get 10, and I will mark 10 on my crotch area. Now I'm also going to add 1 inch for seam allowance, so that makes it 11. So I'm going to mark 11 on my crotch, my waist, and also I'm going to mark 11 on the length of my trouser, and I will connect the points. Now we want to get our flap, and to get my flap, what I normally do is to divide that initial 10 inches that we did. I'm going to divide it by 4. So basically all you are doing is you are dividing your actual hip by 4, and then you are going to divide the results by 4 again. So my hip is 40. If I divide it by 4, that is 10, and then I'm going to divide 10 by 4 again, that is 2.5. I'll come over to my crotch area and mark 2.5 at the line where the two lines intersect, and I will use my ruler to connect from that point to any comfortable points on the previous line that I made, like you can see. Then I labeled that my flap. On my flap line, I'm going to come to where my lines intersect, and I will mark 1 inch to the side, and I will also mark 1 inch up. Then I'm going to make a curve. I will come to the waistline, and then from that center crotch line, I'm going to take my waist 27, and I will divide it by 4. That is 6.75. So I'm going to mark 6.75 there. Then I'm going to add 1 inch for allowance. Next, I will mark my waist to hip, and I normally use 9 inches for my standard. Almost everybody works for almost everybody. Then I labeled that my hip, and now I'm going to connect my waist to my hip, and then I want a curve, so I'm going to just gently curve it out. Now we're done drafting our front pattern. Then I'm just going to go over to my crotch area, and I'm going to add 2 inches on my waist, and I'm also adding it on my crotch area. Then I'll connect the points. I'm also going to add 2 inches on my flap extension area, and I'm going to connect it to the length of my trouser. Now I'm going to come over to the external crotch area, and I'm going to also draw another curve. So now the pattern inside is my front, and what I've just added now makes up for the back. So I'm going to add an extra 3/4 of an inch to that, and I'm going to label it my zip allowance. So now I have the front and the back, and I'm just going to cut out my shape. So now I place my paper on my fabric, and I'm using 1.5 yard because I'm pretty small. But if you're like anything above size 8, then just gingerly use your 2 yards. Okay, so when I got to the zipper area, I notched the points that I labeled my zip earlier. So yes, we're done cutting our pants now, and we cut the back first. Now to cut the front, I'm going to cut out the parts that I labeled the back. So because I'm not very big, I was able to manage 1.5 for my trouser. But as you can see, I was really struggling because I don't know what happened. My crepe was not actually 60 inches. It was maybe like 56 or something. And I didn't realize till I started cutting. So all these things you want to keep in mind when you are buying your crepe. So it's that you just buy 2 yards. If you buy 2 yards, you can be very sure that it will be enough for you to cut your pants. But if you are very small, like a size 6, you can still use 1.5 yard, just not to waste money. Now it's time to sew, but first I'm going to mark how I will be sewing. So I'm going to mark 1/2 inch the way I've marked on my trouser for the front, and then for the back I'm going to first start by marking 1/2 inch on the crotch area, and then I will just extend it 1/2 inch away from the notch of the zip that we made earlier. Before I sew the front piece, I'm going to mark 1 inch away from the midpoint on the crotch area, and I'm going to just connect it towards my waist area, and I will cut. Now I'm just going to go ahead and sew the front with my normal sewing stitch. Now to sew the back, I'll first start with tight stitches, and then when I get to the point where I want my zip to stop, I'm going to sew with loose stitches, and I'm going to sew it up to the waist. Now let's mark our darts. To mark my darts, I opened the seam area of my back piece, and from that seam I'm going to mark 4.5 on both sides of my trouser. So I'm going to mark 4.5 on my waist and also extend it down and draw a straight line. And now I am going to mark the length of my dart. The length of my dart is 4.5, right? So I'm going to mark that, and then I will fold my dart area and then draw my darts. Like you can see, then we're going to head over to the sewing machine and sew. Once I'm done sewing my darts, they look like this. Remember, the front of my trouser is dartless. So now I'm going to match the crotch area of the back with the crotch area of the front. Then I'm going to pin, and then we'll go ahead and sew. So I'm going to sew from the midpoint to one side, and then I'm also going to sew the other side as well. Now we are done sewing, and let's shape our pants. So the first thing I'm going to do is to mark my waist to hip, which is 9 inches. I'm just going to label that, and I'm also going to mark the same thing on the front as well. How you take your measurement is to measure the waist measurement on the back. I have 18, then I'm going to place that 18 on the front, and I'm going to measure what is in front. I want 27, so I'll make a little mark on 27 because that's my actual waist. Then I'm going to measure what is left. I have 7 left, so I'm just going to divide 7 by 4, and that will be my allowance for my waist. My allowance for my waist is now 1.75. So I'm just taking 1.75 on both sides of my pants. That's the front alone. For my hip, I'll measure what I have, and I have 25 on the back. So I'm going to place 25 on the front, and my hip is 40 normally. So I'm going to add 1 inch for ease. So if I mark 41 on my hip, I will take the measurement that is left, and I have 4 inches left. And if I divide 4 by 4, I'm going to have 1 inch. So I'm going to take 1 inch on my hip, and I'm going to mark my hip curve. Now from the hip, I'm going to measure the 1 inch that we measured on our hip, and I'm going to take that 1 inch to the base of my trouser. Once I'm done with that, I'm just going to connect it. And when it's time to sew, I'm not going to just sew like that. I'm going to align the front and the back of the pants, I'm going to make sure they are equal, and then I'm going to sew on both sides of the pants. For my band, I cut a piece of clothing that is longer than my waist, minimum of say 5 inches. You are going to cut it off later. Then the width is about 5 inches as well. Then I folded it into two. The interfacing that I used here is hairstay, and now I want to fold it like you can see, and I'm going to grab my hemming gum. The reason I normally do this is for neatness and to make it very precise when I'm sewing. So I'm going to fold it into two. Then I'm also going to grab my hemming gum, and I'm also going to fold my hemming gum into two as well. Then I'm going to place it on the fold of my band, and I'm going to just sew it from beginning to the end. If you've done the right thing, you should have something that looks like this. That's one part is longer, the other part is shorter. That is fine. Set that aside. Now I'm going to grab my trouser, and I'm going to open the zipper allowance area. Or be careful when you're doing this because you don't want your fabric to tear. So I'm just trimming off the excess threads, and I'm going to open up the zipper allowance area. Then for the part that is longer on my band, I'm going to place it, that's right side to right side on my trouser, like you can see. Then I'm going to sew from beginning to the end. Now this is completely optional, but you can decide to extend the band like you can see me do on my sewing. You see that the band is a little bit in front more than the zipper allowance area, but yes, I'm just sewing all the way around. Another thing I always like to do when I'm sewing my allowance area is to make like a little V cut, because if you don't make this cut when you're sewing, it's possible that your band is going to catch one part and then the allowance will not be pulling up. I don't know if you guys have experienced it before, but yes, cut a little bit of like triangle shape on your allowance area, and then you open it up. Don't close it, open it, so that when you're ironing, you can easily open up your seams. Now normally the next thing to do is to just close up your band like this. As you can see, I inserted this seam inside, but before I do that, this one is completely optional. You can decide not to do it and just do your weaving when you're done. So I'm just going to cut it like you can see. As you can see, I'm leaving like extra 0.5 inch, right? Then I'm now going to turn my band to the other side. Again, this part is completely optional. You can see how I am gently placing my sewing, and then I'm just going to sew on that part just to secure it and make it look like no, my band is neat on the band area. I don't know, I just like to do this sometimes. Then when I'm done, I'm now going to secure the sewing inside the band, and then I'm going to iron. Again, when you're ironing, iron with a steam iron. If you don't have steam iron, iron with a normal dry iron, but always wet your trouser. If you don't wet it, your trouser is going to be having this ironing mark, and then it's going to be looking weird and handmade, and that's not what you want, baby. You want a very fine and beautiful trouser. Now if you are going for aesthetics, you can see that the front looks like we did not sew it at all, so you can decide to just use needle and thread to just tack some points, maybe like the band to the seam allowance area. But me, I don't have time for that one, so I'll just go ahead and sew on the band. But if you don't sew it at all, if you don't tack it or anything, hemming gum is not that strong, it's going to come off later. So guys, I'm just going to be sewing my own just below the seam allowance, below the band joining allowance, just to make it look neat. So guys, I am done. And sewing where we can't see it, nobody's gonna know. How would they know? How would they know? So guys, if you sew it carefully, I'm not going to see the sewing parts. So now I'm just going to attach my zip. But before I attach my zip, I want to remeasure my waist. Now in the course of sewing, your waist measurement must have shifted. It will always shift. So you're just going to place your tape from the center front of your trouser, okay, and then you're going to sew with loose stitches from the point where you actually want. Now I want 13.5. That's my weight divided by 2 is 27. My weight divided by 2 is 13.5. So I'm just going to sew from that point to wherever I want on my pants, and I'm going to head over to the iron and I'm going to open it. If you iron it, then attaching your zip will be easier. And I know that a lot of you are very lazy with when it comes to zip. You're like, no, I don't like fixing zip. Fixing zip is not that hard. So now I've ironed the center of my zipper area with my steam iron, and now I'm just going to open it up. Again, I'm using my scissors to open it up. You can use your blade, anything like, or your hand. Just don't tear your trouser. So now I already measured where I want my zipper to stop, and I'm going to sew with tight stitches, okay, like 2 or 3, whatever you want to use. So this one is to secure the zipper and make sure that your trouser does not tear when you wear it. Always secure it. So now I'm going to open up one part of my trouser, the zipper area, and then I close my zip, because this is like the easiest way to do it, right? So I'm just going to place the teeth of the zip very close to the fold that we made when we ironed the trouser. So you see, that's why it's important for you to iron your trouser. And now I'm going to sew my zip twice. So the first one is not close to the edge of the zipper at all. I'm just sewing in a way that will just secure my zip. So I'm just going to sew all the way down. As you can see, the zip looks like it is loose, whatever, that's fine, no problem. So I'm just going to open it up now. At this point, I'm going to open it, and then I'm going to match the teeth of my zip with the beginning, with the band, okay, and I'm going to sew on the other side as well. So you want to be very careful so that your zip is going to align properly. If there's any shifts, then there'll be a problem. If you are not perfect, you can still use pins to secure your zip first, then you sew the first time, and I'm also going to be aligning the fold with the edge of the zip. The only thing is that I'm not just sewing too close to the teeth of the zip. Now, if you've been following me, your zip is supposed to look something like this. It's supposed to look like your zip is not firm, and that is okay. So I'm just cutting out the excess thread here. Now we're going to the star of the show, which is my zipper foot. This is like the game changer. This is what makes fixing zip easy. This is why I'm confident in fixing my zip. So I'm going to grab my zipper foot, and I'm going to exchange the foots that I have currently on my machine. Once I'm done with this, I can now sew close to the teeth of my zip. Now you're not sewing on the teeth, but you're sewing as close as possible. So I'm just going to do this for both sides of the zip. So guys, this is what our zip looks like. Absolutely gorgeous. And this is me wearing the project. This is me wearing the trouser. I really hope this tutorial was helpful for you. If it was, please give me a huge thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel. Share this video to your friends and family. And I will see you all in my next one. Bye guys.